Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Munish Bhatia, a co-founder at India Accelerator. Munish, I cannot thank you enough for doing this today. How are you, by the way?
I'm great, Michael, and thank you so much for having me here and talk about what we have been doing. So looking forward to our conversation.
It is my complete pleasure. And before we get to that conversation, can we get a little bit of your background for some context?
Sure, would love to talk about that. I come from a small city called Fatehbad from Haryana. It's a tier 3 city, state of Haryana, around 200 kilometers from Delhi, the capital of India. I did my education there and then moved to a big city in Gurgaon, which is what we call as NCR now. I did my graduation there in Bachelor's of Engineering in Electronics and Instrumentation.
Oh, no.
And since then, I've been living here in Gurgaon almost, 20, 22 years have passed. Do not feel like I am from Fatehpur anymore. I feel like I'm from Gurgaon. I've spent more time in this city than the city I was born in.
Interesting. What do you
Yeah.
feel? What do you feel you bring with you when you come from a small town or a small city in India into a big city? And the reason why I'm asking is because I want our listeners outside of the region to understand just the scope and the size of a big city in India, and also in reverse, just the scope and how small some of these small towns can be.
Sure. So the city that I live in now, Gurgaon, which is a big city,
Mm.
it's just close to capital of India, Delhi.
Yep.
So it has all the facilities that you need: education, hospitals, and of course accommodation. In mere size of it, I think we are like second IT hub after Bangalore here.
Okay.
So a lot of professional work out of here, and we have everything, I would say. But in small city, it's not like that. Where I was born, there were hardly like 8 to 10 schools, 3 colleges overall. Less than 5 lakh. I would say half a million and below the population
Right.
for overall region, including that city. So there were resources were less, but really really liked there because it gives you a humble beginning in terms of how to manage your money, how to talk to people and create relationship. Because in small city, that's what works a lot. People are not that money minded. They like to have a conversation just because they want to speak to you rather than if they have some work with you. So I think that kind of mindset comes from small city, and that does help a lot while you move to big city and you want to create a name for yourself. And that's what I learned in my job as well. I started way back in 2005 after I did my graduation. It was like first job for me. I was really excited. It was an MNC, Aon Hewitt. I was a
Okay.
part of mainframe analyst. It's a full tech job for me. First one, I was excited. My parents were excited. I got a job. But I was bringing what, I got from my humble beginnings, that, I could connect with people a lot more than anything else. I wasn't sure what I'm going to do in the job, but I was sure that, I'm going to make a lot of friends. So that was my focus at that time.
Does the small upbringing, the small city, the small town upbringing inform the way you look at the opportunity for investment in India at scale? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in
Tell
fact,
me.
if I talk about what I do at India Accelerator, of course, co-founder is just a technician, but I work very closely with startups. I meet almost 1,300 startups a year,
Wow.
and out of that, almost 60% of them comes from tier 2 and beyond. And the problems are a lot different in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The mindset of the founders are a lot different. They are looking for solving some real problems, and they may not know the jargons as such, but they are very well, from their skills point of view, they know how to manage their money well. So I think that gives me that perspective because I understood those problems while I was growing up. So I can give them some leeway in terms of how I select those startups while I'm part of the accelerator, and that does add a lot of value because I've seen those startups growing very well.
Right.
One of the qualities that we look at founders while they raise money from us is that they should be able to manage their money well as well, and of course utilize it for what they have taken it for. And that kind of honesty and understanding of managing money kinds of help.
I don't know what the stats are, and it's not a quiz, right? But I'm just curious. I wonder what the percentage is of people in India that live outside of the big metropolitan areas. Do you know what I mean? And the reason why I'm
Yeah,
asking is because does it then inform the ideas that come to your company, the India Accelerator? Because those are the bigger problems to solve, if that makes sense?
absolutely. I think if in sheer number of people in terms of percentage, it's almost 75 and above, I
Wow.
would say.
Wow.
And that would mean like 800 million people.
Right.
India has like almost 1.3 billion people now. So out of that, 800 to 900 million stays in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The problems are a lot different, definitely. And that's where the masses, we differentiate in terms of terminology with them. We call India, which is like a metropolitan driven, and then we call it Bharat, which is like tier 2 and tier 3 cities beyond. And the problems are different. The way you acquire customers becomes a lot different, and the strategies that we ask founders to implement also change in terms of the numbers that you require to acquire, be it your CAC. Those are totally different in those cities. So that's where we want to make a difference and acquire a lot more customers for these founders so that they can test their products initially for sure, at the same time scale up faster.
Yeah. What was the impetus for you leaving a corporate job? And I want to get back to this, right? Because you said you were super happy when you first got your job. But I
Yeah.
think in instances like yours are very similar to mine. When you get your first job, it's not just you that's happy, it's your entire family and maybe in a way your extended family. They're like, okay, that's one of us that's going to be fine kind of thing. We don't have to worry about him
Absolutely.
anymore and he can help us out. I know what that's like. Right.
Absolutely.
But then when you decide to leave
Yeah.
and start up something brand new, and again, when you did it, you weren't 25. I don't know how old you were, but it doesn't matter in a way. But did your family just think, oh, come on, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a service background. My parents have always been job, and when I got a job, they were like, okay, he's there, he's kind of settled. So I worked almost for 15 years in my corporate jobs,
Right.
couple of MNCs. I traveled across the globe, worked in different regions. Did quite well. I changed my stream from mainframes to project management, lean consulting, Six Sigma. So I became the
Oh, wow.
numbers guy, and I was working with finest minds there, and trying to help them solve their problems in terms of reducing the cost for their operations or cost of their infrastructure. So I learned a lot in my corporate life for sure, and I was quite happy because I was traveling.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I was solving the problems that was bringing industrial 4.0. I was working with one of the large MNC computer sciences corporation, which then merged with HPE, HP Enterprise, right?
Oh, okay.
So I'm a large corporate of almost $22 billion, and there was a lot to learn. But then I realized that I was still working for someone else, and probably I was solving someone else's problem and maybe not contributing a lot more to the real India problem as such. And at the same time, the startup ecosystem in India was growing really well. I was monitoring it for 3-4 years, especially after the current government came in 2014. They were very bullish on startup ecosystem. So, I would say passionate reader. I, read a lot in terms of blogs, news, kind of stocks that are going in. So I was seeing how the trend is going, and then I realized that I've already done this for 15 years. Now I probably should do something which is for the next 20, 30 years, probably, which is
Right.
the future of India, probably. And that's why I got excited. And of course, to your point, the family was not very sure, why I'm doing that. Because I was in a high paying job and,
Stable.
stable, and I have a kid also. So it was almost like I was 35, I would say, at that time. And 15 years of life like this, you kind of become stable and probably in a comfort zone. But that's where I thought I can make a lot more difference if I jump into the startup ecosystem. And I got this opportunity. I thought I will take it. I discussed it with my parents. Of course, my wife was very supportive, but my father and my parents, they were not sure how this will turn up, right?
Right.
They were like, why you want to do this? And initially they said, you should not do it. But
Right.
of course, gradually they started supporting it. Then they could see I'm progressing and I was helping a lot of startups. But it was difficult initially. To your point, if you come from that background,
Yeah.
people tend to say, why don't you stick to something safe rather than take a risk? But that's where I wanted to be different.
When you stepped back then, looking at all the stuff you've been reading, all of the information you've been gathering, whether it's blogs or newspapers or radio or television, and thinking about what the opportunity was in the startup space in India, you said it already, right? Tier 2, tier 3 cities, 800 million people, the whole country, 1.2 billion people. It's just a massive opportunity.
Absolutely.
But what did that opportunity look like to you, right? And then how does it manifest itself inside of the India Accelerator? You understand what I mean, though, right? Because there's this massive thing to do, but you can't do everything. So you see this whole thing and then you say, we want to do this. How does that work?
Right. So I think initially we were working with some startups to build them tech products, and we realized that it's not just tech that they need help with, because we come from tech background. So we understood, that is something that we can help them. But
Right.
there were other aspects like, BD, getting them connected to corporates or SMEs, or even funding to them. Most of things were alien to them. These founders were just out of graduation. They know how to build a product, but other services or how to scale up, they were not sure of. What I have done in my previous organization was that I was transforming big clients, right? Either by automation or by putting tools. So I was good in that. So I realized that I can add value there. And coming up with the accelerator makes sense because then I'm giving them everything they need other than what they already have, basically. So I need to pick up small use cases for, especially for startups who are just starting and who need probably, start off with the space to sit, probably some digital marketing, probably small seed fund, so that at least they can survive for 6 to 1 year. because at that stage that's become very critical. If you are not surviving, you can't even think of scaling up.
Right.
So that hand holding becomes very critical, and I realized, let me pick up 5 to 6 startups rather than working with 100 of them, and try to make a difference there. So we started very slow. We just used to do 12 startups a year. I'm talking about 2017.
Right.
And we realized that we have to build an ecosystem around this of all these services, as well as probably give them what they want, and we slowly built that. So first 3 years of journey, 2017 to 2019, was more to build our organization, the co-working centers we built, the partners that we onboarded, the corporates we onboarded. Of course, started working with governments as well to see what kind of policies can be implemented to startups. At the same time, get them access to funds. And we were quite happy with the progress because we were domain agnostic initially, but then we realized that the same ecosystem we can create it for some specific domains as well.
Go ahead.
And it was like so huge opportunity that we said, okay, let's pick agri-tech as first use case. And to your point that there are 800 million people in tier 3 cities, agri-tech is such a huge impact there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them come from agriculture background. And if we can bring technology to them and help them improve their life, probably income, that would be great. And that's where we pick agri-tech and specifically set up that vertical within India Accelerator, where we brought in some agri-tech startups and started helping them. So that was just...
How do you get these companies? Like you say, we picked up this startup, we picked up that one. I'm sure it's not that easy, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you do that? How do you find them? How do you vet them? What do you care about the most when you're looking at it?
So it's a long process in terms of, we call for application. We do a lot of marketing online. Of course, a lot of startups reach out to us organically as well, now that they know that we provide this kind of support. And we also have team who look for the right use cases.
Okay.
So once they apply to us or we reach out to them, there is a 4-step process to filter them. Level 1 to level 4, we call it. The team meet them to understand their use case. Then, I meet them to probably go into detail in terms of what they need help with or what stage they have reached basically. And then we identify key 4 or 5 areas where they need help and how we can bring that help to them. And what we essentially look is that founders should be mentorable in this case, that it should be ready to change. The use case should be good enough, or maybe I would say the market should be large that we can make a difference. At the same time, what is the competition and how the industry is going, right? So that's where our expertise coming in. We talk to a lot of VCs, we meet a lot of founders as well. So there is some bit of understanding how the industry is shaping. And based on that, we select some of these startups. We don't select all of them. Our success rate in terms of selection is just 2 to 3% of the applications that we receive.
Got it.
But we focus a lot on them once they are selected and help them with all the help they require.
So one of the things that we read a lot, I like to break these myths, right? Because I've been involved in the startup space for a long time. I'm really curious about your opinion on this. One of the myths we read is that, 90-something% of startups fail. And I would make the contention that 98% of the ones that fail never should have been funded. So that's
absolutely
right. You know what I mean? So how do you... And I think that the best investors, you notice I didn't say venture capitalists, but the best investors, including the best VCs, don't invest actually in a ton of companies. They invest in like 7 or 12 or whatever it is, because they're saying even if we have all this capital, we don't want to waste it on things that we're just not sure about, right?
Right.
Is that fair? Like, do you think you guys have a better way of doing this so you're not just funding stuff just to fund it, but being very specific about what you care about?
Absolutely. And that's where we are different from VCs, Michael. I would say we have the opportunity to work with a lot of startups. So we did start with 10 to 12 startups a year, but now last year we held more than 50 startups. And this year we are doing 100 startups.
Okay.
So that's the advantage that the accelerator have. We don't judge them just in terms of where they are right now. We see the potential where they can be and what help we can provide them. So VC has a mandate of, probably some funds should go at which stage. But for us, that is not the case. If we like the use case and we like the founders and we know that they can build a good company, we will back them, right? We may not essentially put cash upfront, but we will bring them onboard as part of the program. We see how they are progressing in that 4 months of program that we have, and we'll give them everything that is required. But if they are actually doing a tremendous job in execution, then we put money as well.
Right.
There are some use cases where we have fund them upfront also, right? We know this is a good use case and they require money to scale up. Let's put check straight away. So that ecosystem that we have created in an accelerator is a lot different than VC. And that's why, to your point, you mentioned 90% of the startup fail. For us, the startup that we have selected, 92% of the startups are still surviving after 3 years.
Right.
So That's the beauty of it, and it's totally different than how the startup ecosystem work, and that's where accelerator can add a lot more value than people appreciate that for.
I think you're 100% right. Do you feel like the longer you do this, the more you do this, and maybe it's already started, that you and the partners, and even actually some of the companies that you're accelerating are just sitting around brainstorming and thinking, we need to find a team that does X. Like if you look at value chain innovation, you're like, we're missing this piece. And then do you go
Right.
out and look for it, or even just try? You know what I mean? Like you're not
Yeah.
advertising for it. Be like, okay, those are the gals we've been looking for. We need to have them in here, kind of thing. Do you do that as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. That happens a lot. In fact, we work with a lot of campuses where we provide campus entrepreneurship program. A lot of founders we find from there, and probably they're actually working on the use cases where they should not be working on the first place.
Right.
But they are good founders. They're good
Right.
founders, and that's where we come in. Because we also work with a lot of corporates, and corporates have some use cases where they are not sure how to solve them.
Right.
So we bring them use cases to these founders who are good talented guys, and we provide them all the support, and we bring that model into a venture studio model that we have. So these ideas you have a ready-made client, and the founders of course can execute it, and we provide the support system. So it's a beautiful model,
Yeah.
and we are now actively doing a lot more than what we were doing earlier.
Do you find that sometimes, right, you'll meet founders, let's say you go to, I don't know, some really great school in India and you're like, this is a great team. But again, because they're young, right? And I find this too, I'm a lot older than you are. But the idea is that like they're super energetic about this thing that they love, but it's not big enough, right? Because it's only
Yeah.
something that's affected them. And because you're experienced and your team's experienced, you have a much more well-developed 360-degree view. And you're like, actually, that's really great. But if you worked on this, I'm guessing some big percentage just go, okay, we'll do that. But do you find sometimes you've got to convince people like, no, no, we're really committed to this thing and you can change their mind?
Absolutely. So there are founders who are open for mentorship, and they understand the
Yeah,
value that we are creating because we are coming from that experience, and they would love to pivot, and we do that all the time.
I'm
Even in
sure.
the program, sometimes things are not working, and we tell them, okay, why don't you do this, or maybe add this kind of feature. This
Right.
could be a little bit of pilot pivot from what you wanted to do, but this could make sense, and they are ready. But there are also founders who are like, I want to do this because this is what I thought. So
Right.
that's where the founders mentorship comes into change, because the industry will never remain the same in another 3 to 10 years time
Yep.
frame. And if you want to build a big organization, you have to change your time also, and that's where these insights kind of help them. So it's a mix of both, but I would say it's mostly the founders are excited to change because they understand, but at the same time, if we are not able to coach them, we tell them very clearly, pause, this will not work for you, and if you want to waste your time, please go ahead, but we want to make sure that you waste your less time, rather than keep on working for 2 years and then decide, oh, this was not worth it.
Right. How do you work with the government? I find this really interesting because one of the first things you said at the beginning was we looked at what the government policy was back in 2014. So what does the government do, or what did they do back then that changed, and how are they evolving over time as well to help support this startup ecosystem?
So I think initially the policies were very nascent. They were also trying to see what works, what doesn't work. The ecosystem has not evolved that much.
Yep.
Even the money that was coming was mostly from foreign VCs. Indian ecosystem or Indian money was not much there.
Okay.
The corporates were really reluctant to that. So the government had to push a lot of schemes where they started, providing probably a seed fund, or different facilities for incubators that have been set up in colleges. So
Okay.
that kind of given a lot of ideas, or even some money for these founders who started generating ideas and started working on their use cases. Earlier, that kind of support was not there. So I would say kudos to the government that they have bring these policies. For us, how that help is that we understand what kind of policies are there, because a lot of founders do not know what
Yeah.
policies are there and how
Yeah.
they can get benefit of it. So we play that part wherein we tell them, okay, you're qualifying for this grant, why don't you apply for it? Or probably if you do this, you will qualify for this. In
Uh,
fact, we ourselves, through our journey, because now we have got access to a couple of grants ourselves, we work very closely with government, and they have given us those grants to be given to these startups, right? One is the Startup India Seed Fund that we have access to. At the same time, we have Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology Samrid scheme, where we co-invest with government. So where we put money, the government is also putting additional 40 lakhs if they want to.
oh,
So that's the access that we have got, and there's so many policies, even at the state level and the center level. but the startup do not know how to utilize it. So
Yeah.
that education part comes in from our side. We give them a list where they qualify and how to go through the process, what is required in terms of the metrics that they need to measure for that, and probably how to engage with it.
Is it exciting? Because I can hear excitement in your voice, actually. Is it exciting for you to watch not just the mentoring that you're doing and the startups that you're helping, but to see if you bring them into a building with other startups in there, the interaction between the other startups that maybe you're not talking to and watching them help each other out as well?
Absolutely. So when we started, we thought, how the program should be. It should
Right.
be at a place or it should be virtual. We decided that we should bring these founders at one place and let them interact with each other. And
Yeah.
that's where we started our co-working centers also.
Awesome.
So that's where the cohort initially started running. But of course, in COVID, we kind of pivoted and we started virtual programs as well. But the access to the founders is there that they can come and work out of our locations.
Right.
What happens here is that, of course, there are founders who are part of the program, but there are a lot of partners, like there are digital marketing, there are legal, there's accounting, so they can just take the benefit of that. At the same time, because these founders are at a similar stage, they are facing the same kind of problem, so they talk to each other and they understand, okay, this is how you fix it, maybe I let me try that as well. So that magic does happen while they are sitting. And in fact, we also learn a lot from them, so
I'm
it's not
sure.
the only one way, right? These are like founders who just out of college is very enthusiastic, they have a lot of energy to execute, and we see, okay, they have a little bit of different mindset in terms of execution as well. Can we bring that to other startups, right? So what is working for one startup, we can use those best practices for other startups also.
But isn't that one of the best parts about this is that, it's not like you're a startup god in one way. It's just like you're a startup accelerator. So you're sitting there having a conversation, you're trying to help somebody do something, and then maybe they say something new and you're like, actually, maybe that's right. I need to put that tool in my toolkit from now on. And then you share that with everybody else as well. That's fun, no?
Absolutely. We are not saying we know everything. We are just the enabler for them, right?
Right.
And we are also learning because the ecosystem is evolving so fast that we also have to learn ourselves. We can't say that we are the god. So we are not, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
But can we give them what they are missing, basically? They are good at few things, but few things are missing, probably, in each of the startup. And we become that partner who bring those things to them.
So now that COVID is over, do you find yourself, because you said before during your corporate career, you travel all over the world, right? And talk to people and help people solve problems and, do all this stuff. And then there was COVID and then you started the accelerator and then there was COVID, you did some virtual programs. But now that you can travel again, do you see yourself just as a team? We'll leave the startups for a second, but as a team, just like traveling all over the world again to make sure that those relationships in the venture capital space, in the angel investor space, in the corporate space are either maintained or strengthened to benefit what you're doing at home and also to take some knowledge from overseas back into India?
Absolutely. So now the program have gone hybrid. Our team is also, giving access to the co-working centers. They can work out of here, or we do virtual Zoom calls and, work with them. We also travel a lot to the point, create partners and, relationship with VCs, because the follow-on funding has to come from them.
Yep.
What we have also started doing now is that, recently we received the Best Accelerator Award from Startup India, from the center government for
Congratulations.
2021. Thank you so much. And what happened was that opened up doors for us to go to other countries. We are getting a lot of requests from Middle East and Africa as well. Countries feel that they are a little behind India from a startup ecosystem point of view. And can there be an entity who can come and bring those best practices to them,
Yeah.
and probably help create that ecosystem? So now we are traveling to those countries and you're talking to governments how we can help them. In fact, we have recently launched similar accelerator in Lanka. So Sri Lanka, we have
Yep.
launched a Lanka accelerator, and we are about to go in Dubai to launch our Dubai accelerator as well. So these couple of discussion has happened after COVID and after we won the award as well. And now we definitely want to help more than what we are doing in India.
I want to ask about Africa because, in a way, what's the right way to say this? There are some equivalencies to India, right? Some. Populations are about the same. Maybe Africa's a little bit bigger. Africa's not one country, 51 countries in Africa. The median age in Africa in some countries is 19 or 20, 21 years old, so still young. But again, similar to the way you said you were brought up, these second and third tier cities, right, outside of some of the major cities in Africa are just ripe for technological advancement. and building an accelerator there and then helping those teams, bringing best practices from all the stuff you've learned in India into Africa could just be transformational, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have getting so much opportunities there that of course the talent is there and the government is also very excited.
Yeah.
It's just that the ecosystem takes time to be created. It's
Yep.
not just that you go there and
No, no, no.
you start working. You have to build each of those elements that we have done. So the idea is, can we do that in a long term and probably take 12 to 18 months to set up those bases there so that the startups start spurning out of it themselves, right? So that's the focus for next 2 years, I would say. Build accelerators across globe. Africa and the Middle East is definitely on the map for us. And there would be awesome opportunities for us to learn from those regions as well.
Sure, sure. I mean, the stuff that's happening in Africa, the Middle East is different, right? Because depending on where you are, in Dubai in particular, it's a very wealthy country, right? It's a super well organized country. The GCC, so the UAE is one thing, the GCC is another thing, but it's a very interesting place to invest. And again, the population density isn't the same as it is in places in India and Sri Lanka and in Africa.
Yeah.
So you're just solving different problems, right? The logistics problems are different, but there are things you can learn there. And then there are things you can learn in Africa to bring back to India as well. This is why I always ask, like, are you building in India for India? Are you building in India for India and the rest of the world? Are you going to the rest of the world to bring back, like, how do all these things get organized in your brain?
Right. So I think the priority is still India, I would say. So 80% of our time and energy focuses on it. In fact, we have gone deeper into it now. If I talk about Tier 2 and beyond cities, we are launching a specific accelerator program, which we call as Bharat X, for
I
Tier
love
2
it.
and Tier 3 beyond cities. Yeah. And we are just starting that along with a think tank called CIEU, who's bringing a lot of access to the policymakers and government policy as well. So our focus is also that. But at the same time, we have seen there is a need for a entity like us to take these knowledge bases to the areas like UAE,
Yeah.
GCC, as well as Africa, because our interaction has shown us that they are very wealthy countries, but the ecosystem doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So right now, a lot of funds are setting up base in Dubai. There's a lot of money, but there is hardly any entity who's working with the startup on the ground level and giving them the support system that is required.
Yeah. They're kind of
And
on
that's
their
why,
own. Yeah.
yeah, they are on. If you want to raise money, Dubai is the best place to do it. But if you want to support, where should they go,
Right.
right? Dubai has created a great story around building infrastructure for co-working or
Yep.
setting up these places for startups to sit. But there are hardly any startup who are operating out of, because there is no other support available. So
Interesting.
that's why we are talking to these government. We are talking to Dubai SME right now to establish accelerator there, and they are very helpful in terms of helping us set up the
Yeah.
base there, and we will be creating that ecosystem for the startups who either need execution capability or they need mentorship or they need access to India also. So a lot of the startups that we are seeing, they are actually set up by Indian expats there, and they are building products for not just GCC but also for India.
Right.
Most of these tech products can be implemented. So we become the access point for them to come to India and just market their product when it's ready. So it's both ways.
Yep. Are you surprised at what's the right word? At the speed of the growth that India Accelerator has been able to experience just in the short time that you've been working on it? Do you know what I mean? Because now you're in Dubai and in Africa and traveling all over the place. Does this surprise you at all? Or were you just like, yeah, we were a killer team from the beginning. This had to happen.
I would say that we are very surprised with what we are doing, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
We thought that we will create an impact for sure, but kind of impact, where all we can do it, we never thought about it. We have actually grown in the last 5 years tremendously from in terms of the number of startups that we engage with or the team that we have. We have a
Right.
very robust team now, but we are still expanding. So Africa and everywhere we have not established yet. So we are
Yep.
setting up
Yep.
those teams. So Dubai and Lanka is where we are now operationally working in next 6 to 12 months will be focused. We're establishing businesses or connections in Africa, which will take another 6 to 8 months to set up bases there.
Right.
But we are very bullish because there is a need from the startup, from the government itself, and we know we can help them for sure.
When you, I'm sure, and I'd be shocked if I'm wrong about this, but I'm sure that on a regular basis you're chatting with your mom, your dad, and your family. And I can see you're smiling. I'm just curious, 5 years into this thing with all the growth and offices, growing around the world, what do they think now about your crazy decision to leave your corporate job to go and do this?
So they are very happy and very proud for what we are doing. And I'm really glad that they have seen that. In fact, I am very glad that the jump that I took from a corporate to a startup ecosystem is kind of working for me.
Yeah.
I get to meet a lot of exciting founders. It's a great learning curve for me as well. How my thought process was in the corporate and how it is right now is a lot different. I have expanded myself, not financially, but also
Yeah.
not just financially, but also in the way I operate. Right, I can do a lot of things at the same time, rather than multitasking has become a different level thanks to these founders. What they have been achieving in their one startup, I get to see it, and it motivates me every day. That's why what that's keep me going. I come here, I want to meet a founder a day or two founders a day, just to get a sense what they are working on and what they are doing different.
Isn't this the best part really about what you do? And that is, there's this amount of personal growth that most people your age don't have the opportunity to experience because they've remained in a stable place, which is perfectly fine, right? Everybody makes their own choices, and not every choice is right for everybody. And it's scary when you go out and start your own company, right? It is scary. And there are a lot of doubters because they care about you. They just want good things to happen to you. It's not even a question about your skill level. It's just like, Munish, are you going to be okay? We're just worried about that. But once you tackle the okayness part of it, the personal growth, there's no price for that. Is that fair?
Absolutely. In fact, that's how the journey has been. The first couple of years have been very tough, I
Yeah.
would say. And the COVID hit
What do we
us.
do
We were
now?
like,
Yeah, it's scary.
what we do now. It was scary because we were actually, paying a
Yeah.
lot of rent on something like co-working as well for the founders. They were not coming to the place, right, because of the COVID. But then we pivoted, right? We also started thinking what we can do best
Right.
to help these startups, and that's where the online program started. And we thought the application would dry down, but it actually increased by 4 to 5 times, because now the startups were coming from all across the country who couldn't travel. They would still want the access to the program, and we were very surprised. And once we started launching those domain specific program, the application flow was amazing. So initially first 2 years we used to do 200 or 300 startup evaluation a year. Now we are almost doing 1300 to
Oh my
1500, I
gosh.
would say. Yeah. And this will bound to increase now that we are also launching our own fund, a micro VC fund, which is almost 350 CR, which is like close to $50 million. Now they know that not just the accelerator bit in terms of mentorship and access they will also get a lot more money than what we were promising
Yeah.
earlier. So now applications are flowing
Do you
through the
feel
roof,
like
I would say.
raising your own money and raising your own fund brings the capital raising closer to the experience of the founders, and it gives you as a team more leverage to say, we're going to do this thing, even if nobody else believes in it. We're so close to it. We know this thing is going to work, or we're so confident we can put our own money into it.
Absolutely. And that was the whole idea, because while we were helping startup growth through acceleration program, and we were definitely
Yep.
giving them seed fund ourselves, but after first or second round, we have to get them
Right.
money from the VCs, because that's
Yep.
what they need for scaling up. And a lot of VCs were coming to us to asking for our pipeline, because these were
Yeah.
curated startups who have actually survived all those areas, and we were helping them. So they wanted to invest. So the idea was, if the VCs are so excited
Right.
about our startup, why don't we
Right.
put
Shouldn't
our
we
own
be?
money, right? That was a logical thing for us to do and launch our own fund. And we were quite excited that a lot of people wanted to help us do that as well. And we have got our SEBI
Good.
approval for our Cat 2 fund, and we are in process to
It just sounds
start
like it's
investing.
strength to strength. Look, I'm going to let you go. This was really fabulous. Munish Bhatia, co-founder at India Accelerator. You have to come back. And more importantly, I would love to get some of your great portfolio companies onto the show as well. We can talk about that later, but this was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Really, really nice talking to you. Looking forward to meet you again.